Hi, and welcome to Penn Central 99's channel. I'm Terry, and this is the River Mountain Model Railroad. Today, we're at the workbench because I'm going to be changing the way I provide air to the airbrush station. I'm going to be installing this regulator so that I can better control the airflow for the airbrush. So let's go ahead and get started. For years, I used this pump by Master Airbrush for my airbrushing. As you can see here, it's a pretty simple operation. It's designed to be portable. There's an on-off switch, there's an air outlet, and there's a control knob. And other than the electrical supply, either AC power or a battery, there's not much to it. It's an on-demand pump. When you depress the trigger on the airbrush, it runs, and when you let go of the trigger, it shuts off. And according to Master Airbrush, they say it runs anywhere from 15 to 25 psi, which is fine. But not having a gauge and a 10 psi differential, I really didn't know how much I was flowing. I know what my airbrushes are supposed to operate, but I didn't know what this pump was running at. So I felt it was time for change, and that regulator is going to let me dial in a little bit closer to the pressures that I think I need for proper airbrushing. This is what I'm going to be using to provide air for the airbrush station. It's nothing more than a shop compressor. It's got a 6-gallon tank, so I could probably run this once. Once it hits the cutout, go ahead and turn the power off and then just use whatever's in the tank to do the airbrushing. That 6 gallons is going to last a couple of airbrushing operations, but the nice thing about that regulator on the airbrush station is now with this regulator, I don't have to change it every time I go to do something. You know, obviously I can't fill tires on the cars at 20 or 30 psi, so I could probably leave this one set for 75 psi, which is going to give me air for the shop and other things, and just go ahead and use the regulator at the airbrush station at about 20 or 25 psi, so I can run that. This orange hose here is what's going to get attached to the airbrush station to provide the air. As you can see by the label, this is a 0.0 air regulator. I got this on Amazon for $14.49. This is the Pro version, which comes with a metal alloy housing, and for the additional 20 or 30 cents more than the plastic one, I thought that would get a little bit more durability out of the metal alloy. The other contents of the package are a gauge, mounting bracket, and there's also two double male adapters, which are 1/4 inch by 1/8 inch fittings. So let's go ahead and get this mounted and we'll get it running. Notice I didn't say parts list or instructions. That's because there isn't any. They either forgot to include them or they expect the user to have a clue. Fortunately for them, I have half a clue. In order to adapt the fittings to my shop air compressor, I'm going to change things up just a little bit. I'm going to take away one of these 1/4 by 1/8 inch double male. I'm going to use the other one for my outlet to my air hose for my airbrush. But to get the air into the regulator, I'm going to use a male fitting or a male chuck off of my air supply. And in order to adapt that, I'm going to need this double male fitting so that everything hooks up together. I'm going to go ahead and get some Teflon tape going on the male threads of my fittings, and so we can start putting things together. I've applied Teflon tape to all but one of the male fittings for all the adapters. I've got the regulator laid out here to orient you how the parts are going to go together. This is the top of the regulator. The moisture trap is on the back side here. This is the gauge, and this is the port for the gauge. This is the air inlet, so there's my double male adapter, which is going to go into my male chuck, and this is the outlet, which is going to go to the airbrush. This is where the hose gets attached to for the airbrush, so I'm not going to put any Teflon tape on there. So let me go ahead and get this threaded up for you. I have all the fittings attached, and I've also attached all the hoses, because one thing I need to do is I need to check for leaks and make sure that all my connections are good. So what I did here is, in the back I've just got some plain water and soap with a brush. This is my air inlet coming off of the tank, and this is the outlet that goes to the airbrush. You can see we're under pressure here. I've got it set for about 20 to 25 psi right now. But what I'm going to do is I need to check for leaks. So I'm just going to take my brush here and put it around these fittings, and hopefully I won't get any bubbles. You can see I'm bubbling it up there with the brush, but I don't see any leaks from that fitting right there. I'm going to check the other side here. Whoa. See that bubbling up like that? I got a leak, so we need to fix that. Or tighten it down. Check underneath. Oh, you can see that the gauge isn't leaking. So I'm going to go ahead and fix that leak before I mount it onto the airbrush station. Well, I don't see any other leaks except for this one over here on this side. That's pretty good. So I'm going to fix that off screen. Okay, we're back. Went ahead and tried several things to go ahead and fix that leak. As you can see here, we're back under pressure. What had happened was, and I'm going to show you here, is I tried to tighten this fitting a little bit more, and it kept leaking. As you can see here, I've got a soap solution here. I got no bubbles. Actually, I had to take it apart and put some more Teflon tape on there and reattach it. As you can see here, we got no leaks, so we're doing pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and get this mounted to the side of the airbrush station. To install that mounting bracket for the regulator, as you can see, I've already got some stuff installed here. Those modified coat hangers are to hang the airbrush when I'm not using it, and that piece of wood is just a 1x1 that I use to attach that to the side of the airbrush station. As you can see, I've already got some holes drilled in the side there to attach the bracket for that regulator. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and screw this in there. I've already got some screws out of the junk drawer that I'm just going to go ahead and mount that. So give me a couple of seconds to mount that. The bracket's been mounted, so we need to install the regulator. This red part here just unscrews from the top of the regulator, and that will fit up inside of that opening. And that's what holds it into the bracket. As you can see, I've got it hand tight. We don't want to over tighten this stuff, especially plastic. So there you can see the gauge, the inlet, and the outlets in the back here. Let me go ahead and hook up the attachments and we'll get some air going. We are under pressure. I've got the inlet hooked up from the tank compressor, and I've got the air hose hooked up in the back that goes to the airbrush. Now, when I depress the trigger for the airbrush, you can see the needle on the gauge moving, and it's right at 20 psi. So this is new, and until I get it dialed in, I'm just going to go ahead and work with that 20 psi until I can get a really good flow. I think that's going to be good because this is a Neo for Iwata, and the manufacturer says that this thing runs at about 15 to 20 psi. So I'm going to go ahead and go with that. If you need to change the settings on the regulator, the knob here, counterclockwise, which is to the left, will lower the pressure. Clockwise, which is to the right, will increase the pressure. And in order to change that, you need to pull up on the knob and rotate it, and then push it down to lock it into position. Well, that pretty much does it for this edition. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned something. And as always, thanks for watching.